We're thinking of moving in with my in-laws now that we're expecting a baby. My mom is still pretty young. She'd probably be happy to help with the housework and take care of her grandchild, right? My son and his wife seemed genuinely convinced they were doing a good thing, telling me this with big smiles on their faces. My husband chimed in, making it even harder for me to find the words. Bob and Karen really care about you, Mary. This is a great idea. Let's all live together. This was not a great idea for me. I was frustrated with both my son and his wife and my husband for not understanding this. My name is Mary. I currently live with my husband, just the two of us. Our son, Bob, married a woman named Karen last year. Karen is a modern young woman with a cute smile. But as a mother-in-law, there are things that concern me. She doesn't help with cooking or cleaning when she visits. She just watches TV and laughs with my husband and Bob. I always helped out when I visited my in-laws, but maybe daughters-in-law these days don't do that. Even if Karen offered to help, I'd probably decline because I have my own way of doing things. I felt a gap in our values. Maybe this is how mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts start. I've never expected much from others, so I just thought about it as if it were someone else's problem. I'm a career woman still working as an office employee. I didn't climb the corporate ladder because I loved my job. I did it out of necessity while raising Bob. My husband also worked, but he had health issues and changed jobs frequently, so his salary wasn't great. I had to work hard because Bob wanted to attend private high school and college. That doesn't mean my husband helped with housework. In the past, it was expected that women would do the housework. I always thought it would be quicker if I just did it myself rather than teaching my husband. Perhaps that was my mistake. Bob, who grew up watching his father, turned out to be a man who doesn't do any housework. When I expressed concern to Karen, she said, "Don't worry, I'm re-educating him." Maybe my parenting wasn't successful. I was busy with work and had to rely on my late mother for most of Bob's care. But hearing my daughter say she's re-educating my son was a blow. I had my issues with Karen, my husband, and even Bob, but family are still strangers to each other in some ways. As long as we're not causing each other trouble, I thought, let everyone live their lives. Then one day, Bob and Karen came to me with an unexpected proposal. We're actually expecting a baby. Bob and Karen came over for their usual visit and told us they had important news. Karen rubbed her belly and smiled shyly. This would be the first grandchild for both me and my husband. We couldn't help but smile and congratulate Bob and Karen. My husband even jumped the gun asking, "Is it a boy or a girl?" Bob laughed. "Slow down. We don't know yet." Both Bob and Karen are working. I've heard it's hard to get into childcare centers these days. When I asked Karen what she plans to do about work after the baby is born, she smiled and said, "I love my job, so I plan to continue." Karen works for an apparel company and has been at the same job since she graduated from vocational school. Raising a child won't be a financial burden for them. When I told her juggling work and parenting will be tough, but I'll help where I can, Karen shyly responded. That's why we're thinking of moving in with you and Dad. A small "what" slipped out of my mouth, but fortunately, it seemed no one heard. Bob, visibly excited, leaned in and said, "Mom, you're still young. You'd be happy to help with housework and take care of your grandchild, right?" Both Bob and Karen seemed to genuinely believe they were making a good offer. But I was at a loss for words. It sounded like they were asking me to become their housekeeper. Sure, the grandchild will probably be adorable, but to move in and take care of the child? While I was struggling to find the words, my husband enthusiastically chimed in. "Bob and Karen really care about you, Mary. It's a great idea. Let's all live together, right, Mary?" I mumbled, "Well, this was not a good idea for me." I was frustrated with both my son and his wife and my husband for not understanding this. Wondering if I was just overthinking, I decided to clarify with Bob and Karen. "You're asking me to do housework and take care of the grandchild, right? I'm still working and already have my hands full with housework." "Don't worry, Mary, you're so efficient. I really admire you," Karen assured me. "Yeah, Mom, you can handle anything. You raised me, so you can definitely take care of a grandchild," Bob added. "By taking care of the grandchild, are you talking about dropping them off and picking them up from daycare?" "If that's all, maybe I could manage." "No, Mary, there's a shortage of daycare spots." "We probably won't get one. That's why we're suggesting we all live together," Karen explained. "So you're saying I should work, do housework, and also take care of the child?" I couldn't help but let out a cold voice. Bob sensed my mood and hastily said, "Mom, maybe it's time for you to quit your job. It'll be easier on you." He's underestimating what it takes to raise a child. I struggled enough raising just Bob. I don't want to be burdened with housework and childcare at this age. And being told to quit my job didn't sit well with me. Like Karen, I take pride in my job. I've been fortunate to advance in my career and have subordinates I want to mentor. I plan to work diligently until I retire. "So I'm going to have to decline your offer," I firmly stated my position. My husband said, "Come on, Mary. Are you trying to make life difficult for Karen? I never thought you'd do something like that." "What difficult for Karen? How is this making life difficult for her?" "It is difficult," came a voice from an unexpected direction. I turned to see Karen, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's terrible that you won't help me when I'm asking you so earnestly. I thought you'd be happy to take care of your grandchild." Bob chimed in, "Mom, that's really harsh. You shouldn't say things like that just because you don't like Karen." I was frustrated by the atmosphere, which had suddenly turned against me. But what annoyed me most was my husband. He was the one who had created this tension in the first place. I was done with him, especially after he used the strong phrase, "making life difficult for Karen." To negate my opinion? Fine then, John. Why don't you move in with Bob and Karen? I absolutely don't want to, so I'll leave this house. "What are you talking about, Mary?" Ignoring my husband's confused voice, I headed straight to my room. "What's going on?" I heard Bob's frantic voice as I gathered my valuables and put them in a large bag. Fortunately, I'm a minimalist at heart and only own the bare essentials. Once I finished packing, I hurried to the front door where Karen was sobbing. "Why does it have to come to this, Mary? Can you help us with our lives? Don't you care about Bob and your future grandchild?" "I do care about my son and future grandchild, but Karen, I have a future too. I'm only in my 50s. I have a lot of good times ahead of me. I've raised Bob to this point, and now I finally get to enjoy my freedom. Please don't interfere with that. I'd rather not see my grandchild if it means giving up my freedom." Stunned by my words, Bob and Karen stood next to my husband, who was shouting, "Where do you think you're going, Mary? The most surprising thing about this whole situation is your attitude, John. Why would you use such a strong phrase like making life difficult for Karen when they're trying to dump housework and childcare on me? It is making life difficult. Karen wants to continue working. You could help out. If you feel that way, why don't you help out, John? You're not working, but I am." That's right. My husband is currently unemployed. He's the same age as me, too young to retire, but he suddenly quit his job because he found it unfulfilling. I've been with him for decades, so I just sighed and thought, here we go again. But I can't live with this man anymore. Why couldn't he step up and say he'd take care of the housework and the grandchild? That's what truly disgusted me. I'm a man. I can't do housework or childcare. Bob is a man, but he can't do housework or childcare either, right? Isn't Karen re-educating him? When I turned to Bob, who was standing there dumbfounded, he said, "Well, I intend to do what I can. It seems Karen's re-education was working." I gave Karen a final apology. "I'm sorry my son has been such a burden to you," and then faced my husband. After hearing all this, I've thought about my future. If I'm going to be stuck doing housework and taking care of a grandchild while John lounges around at home, then I'm not interested. "I've decided to separate from John," I said to my stunned husband. "Thank you for everything," and turned back to Bob and Karen. "I don't know if you'll live with Dad, but don't count on him for anything. Maybe if Karen re-educates him, he'll be somewhat useful. Goodbye. Have a healthy baby." I left the house without any emotion. My husband followed me for a while, but seemed to give up when he saw I wasn't stopping. I headed to my sister Lisa's place, where she lives alone and single. Lisa is a successful writer and lives in a pretty big house all by herself. When I explained the situation to her, she was thrilled to have me. "Welcome, sis, to this single life," she joked as she greeted me. Living with Lisa was the epitome of freedom. We cooked whatever we wanted, went out only when both of us felt like it, and it was no big deal if one of us didn't want to go. Our finances were separate. So as long as we contributed a set amount to the household, the rest was ours to spend freely. Feeling at home in this new lifestyle, I sent my husband divorce papers and even hired a lawyer. The divorce went through. Lisa and I threw a party to celebrate, indulging in snacks and chocolates we usually wouldn't eat. It felt like a return to our younger days. As I had expected, my husband Bob and Karen gave up on living together. It was Karen who wanted out, saying there was no benefit in living with a man who couldn't handle housework or childcare. Bob sided with Karen, and my husband was left to live alone. A year later, Bob called, almost begging me to take care of their child. As Karen had anticipated, their child wouldn't get into a childcare center and ended up on a waiting list. I was tempted by the desperation in my son's voice, but I have my own life to live and declined. Mom, that's harsh, but Karen's parents live not too far away. When I suggested they ask them for help, Bob seems uncomfortable. Bob doesn't like Karen's parents. Even before they married, he's always found Karen's parents difficult, as they spoil her rotten. But the time for me to sacrifice my life to help my son is long past. I've prioritized my kids enough. Now it's time to live for me. After telling Bob to figure things out for himself, I haven't heard from him. It felt lonely, but I was content with my newfound freedom. Years later, I retired and was able to pass the baton to a subordinate I had wanted to mentor. As I left my workplace surrounded by people and receiving a beautiful bouquet of flowers, I felt fulfilled. Now, what to do with the blank canvas of my future? Lisa suggested, let's go on a trip. She showed me a brochure for a round-the-world cruise. With my retirement fund and savings, and Lisa being a successful writer, we could both afford it. I never thought I'd consider going on a cruise, but as I looked at the brochure with Lisa, I felt excited about the future. I'm so glad I didn't sacrifice my freedom for the sake of my son's needs. My life is just beginning. I've decided to paint the rest of my life with only joyful colors.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.